Today, we're diving into a Fox News segment from Hannity that lays out a very specific U.S. strategy for dealing with a protest crisis in Iran. We're going to break down exactly how that strategy was presented, piece by piece, so we can really understand the story being told. All right, so the segment kicks off with some really powerful language, right? Incredible footage, massive crowds. You can feel how that immediately sets this dramatic, urgent tone. It's framing this not just as a protest, but as a major popular uprising, right from the get-go. And they don't just mention it and move on. No, the source builds on that dramatic opening by painting this picture of a huge, widespread movement. And notes the language they use. It really emphasizes the idea of regular people rising up. That's a huge part of the narrative they're building here. So how do you drive home just how serious this is? Well, the broadcast throws out a very specific and tragic number. It cites reports of 2,000 civilians killed in the crackdown. You know, a figure like that is really designed to hit you with the severe human cost of this conflict. And they don't stop there. To really paint a picture of just how massive this crisis is, the source adds this really vivid detail, reports of morgues and hospitals overflowing. It's a pretty grim image, and it's clearly there to show you just how intense and violent things are on the ground. Okay, so once they've set that scene, this segment pivots to the big question. How is the U.S. responding to all of this? And it lays out what it calls a really clear, multi-pronged strategy from the administration. So they break the whole approach down into these three big pillars: diplomacy, economic force, and military might. And what's really important here is how the source presents these, not as separate choices you pick from a menu, but as interconnected parts of one single comprehensive strategy. So let's break this down, starting with that first pillar. And this one is pretty interesting because the source really makes a point of saying that, and this might surprise some people, diplomatic channels are very much active. Now, what's really interesting here is the direct quote from the president. That statement, Iran called, Iran wants to negotiate, is used to make a really specific point. It's not just that diplomacy's on the table. It's that Iran is the one actively asking for it. And to really hammer this point home, the source brings in a statement from the press secretary. The key phrase here is that diplomacy is always the first option. See, it's all about building this story that negotiation is the go-to plan, even as these other tougher options are waiting in the wings. But of course, diplomacy is just one part of the strategy. So let's look at that second pillar, economic pressure. And according to the segment, this isn't just your standard sanctions. We're talking about a very direct, very public economic threat. The broadcast points to this super specific warning issued by the president, threatening a 25% tariff on any country that does business with Iran. So you see, the point here is that this economic pressure is framed as a tool to internationally isolate the Iranian regime. And that brings us to the third and final pillar discussed in the segment, the military option. The source makes it crystal clear that this isn't just being presented as some what-if scenario. No, they're presenting it as a tangible and active consideration. So to back this up, the segment points to a few concrete things: the president being briefed, a new travel warning, and this really stark advisory for U.S. citizens to leave now. These are all presented as signals that this isn't just talk. And they really drive this home with another powerful quote from the press secretary, saying the president is not afraid to use lethal force when necessary. The source is using this to paint a picture of an administration that is resolute and ready to act decisively. And this is a perfect example of how the source builds its case for the credibility of this military threat. The press secretary brings up a past success, Operation Midnight Hammer, basically to argue that the administration has a proven track record, which makes any threats they're making now feel that much more real. So when you put these three pillars together, you've got the offer of diplomacy, the squeeze of economic pressure, and the very real threat of military force. They all funnel into this one single overarching message that the whole segment is trying to get across. The broadcast really builds toward one clear, concise summary of the entire U.S. posture as they're presenting it. What is the one thing you're supposed to take away from this whole complex strategy? And there it is. This simple four-word phrase is presented as the definitive summary of the administration's whole approach. It's meant to tell you that, hey, no option has been ruled out. The response could be anything, and it could be everything all at once. So this breakdown of the source material leaves us with a really critical question to think about. When a nation says everything is on the table, what does that actually mean for the people on the ground? How does it affect the protesters, the government, and any chance for a peaceful resolution? That's the key question this reporting leaves us with.